Hello and welcome to my channel, and today is Thursday, and that means it's time for another episode of True Crime Tales. And today we're going to be talking about the Cheshire Murders. As always, there's a content warning, graphic descriptions of crimes, talk of death, crimes against children, etc. On July 23, 2007, two intruders invaded the home of the Petit family in Cheshire, Connecticut, United States. The perpetrators, Linda Hayes, at the time known as Stephen Hayes, and Joshua Andrew Komisarjevsky, initially planned only to rob the house, but went on to murder Jennifer Hawk Pettit and her two daughters, 17-year-old Haley Pettit and 11-year-old Michaela Pettit. Their father, Dr. William Pettit, managed to escape despite sustaining severe injuries. Upon entering the Pettit's home, Komisarjevsky beat William with a baseball bat, and the pair restrained him in the basement. Hawk Pettit and her daughters were also restrained. Hayes later kidnapped Hawk Pettit and forced her to withdraw money at a bank. After returning to the home, Hayes raped Hawk Pettit and strangled her to death. Komisarjevsky raped 11-year-old Michaela. The invaders then decided to burn down the house to destroy evidence. With Haley and Michaela tied to their beds, the invaders doused them and the house with gasoline and set it on fire, leaving them to die of smoke inhalation. The case garnered significant attention in Connecticut, with the Hartford Courant citing it as possibly the most widely publicized crime in the state's history. The murders received national and international attention and had a significant impact on Connecticut's death penalty, ultimately delaying its abolition. Both Hayes and Komisarjevsky were convicted of the murders and sentenced to death. Their sentences were vacated in August 2015 when the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional and retroactively commuted all death sentences to life imprisonment. On the evening of Sunday, July 22, 2007, 48-year-old Hawk Pettit and her daughter Michaela went to a local Stop and Shop grocery store in Cheshire, Connecticut. They picked up food for a family dinner Michaela planned to prepare. During their trip to the grocery store, Komisarjevsky noticed and took interest in them, proceeding to follow them home. Prosecutors argued at the trial that Komisarjevsky was motivated by money and his interest in Michaela, whom he later sexually assaulted. Shortly afterwards, Hayes sent a text message to Komisarjevsky that read, "I'm chomping at the bit to get started. Need a margarita soon." Hayes then texted, "We still on?" Komisarjevsky replied, "Yes." Hayes' next text asked, "Soon?" To which Komisarjevsky replied, "I'm putting the kid to bed. Hold your horses." Hayes replied, "Dude, the horses want to get loose. LOL." According to Hayes' confession, she and Komisarjevsky had planned to rob the Pettit house under the cover of darkness, leaving the family bound but otherwise unharmed. Both attributed the grisly outcome to a change of plan. Upon their arrival in the early hours of July 23rd, they found William asleep on a couch in the sunroom. Komisarjevsky entered the basement through an unlocked door and took a baseball bat he found leaning on the basement stairs. Komisarjevsky then entered the sunroom and used the bat to strike William 4 or 5 times. Komisarjevsky and Hayes bound William's wrists and ankles with plastic zip ties and rope. William remembered one perpetrator telling the other, "If he moves, put 2 bullets in him." The children and their mother were then bound in their respective rooms. Hayes and Komisarjevsky tied them by their wrists and ankles to their bedposts and placed pillowcases over their heads. After restraining the victims, Komisarjevsky and Hayes ransacked the house for cash. They then took William to the basement, where they tied him to a support pole. Hayes and Komisarjevsky continued ransacking the house for money, but were not satisfied with what they found. They then found a check register with $40,000. They decided to steal $15,000. Surveillance video from a gas station shows Hayes purchasing $10 worth of gasoline in 2 cans that were taken from the Pettit home. After returning to the house, Hayes took Hawk Pettit to the bank. The prosecution later claimed that this was evidence of premeditated murder. Hayes forced Hawk Pettit to withdraw $15,000 from her line of credit when the bank opened. Hawk Pettit informed the bank teller that 2 men were holding her family hostage in their home and threatening to kill them all. Bank surveillance cameras captured the transaction. The bank manager called 911 and reported the situation to police while Hawk Pettit was still with the teller. The manager reported to the 911 dispatcher in real time as Hawk Pettit left the bank. The manager told the dispatcher that Hawk Pettit had indicated that the home invaders were being nice and that she believed they only wanted money. The Cheshire police responded to the bank's report by assessing the situation and setting up a vehicle perimeter without revealing their presence. While the police were outside the house, Hayes and Komisarjevsky aggravated the nature of their crimes. Komisarjevsky sexually assaulted 11-year-old Michaela, which he later confessed to when interrogated. Evidence that Komisarjevsky raped Michaela came from her autopsy, during which state medical examiner Dr. Wayne Carvey found his semen in her body. Komsarjeski photographed the assault and rape on his cell phone. In his interrogation, he claims that he believed Michaela was 14 or 16. Forensic testing results showed that there was bleach in Michaela's clothes, indicating that Komsarjeski may have tried to eliminate DNA evidence from the assault. According to Hayes' confession, Komsarjeski provoked Hayes into raping Hawk Pettit. William was able to hear his wife's assault upstairs. He yelled up and heard one of the invaders say, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William then managed to escape. He later said, "I thought it's now or never, because in my mind, at that moment, I thought they were going to shoot all of us." Hayes said in her confession that while she was raping Hawk Pettit on the living room floor, Komsarjeski entered and announced that William had escaped. Hayes then strangled Hawk Pettit. Hayes and Komsarjeski doused her lifeless body and parts of the house, including the daughters' bedrooms and daughters themselves, with gasoline. Investigators would later find the accelerant on the Pettit sisters' beds and on the clothing they were wearing. Hayes and Komsarjeski started a fire and fled the scene. Haley and Michaela both died of smoke inhalation. Haley managed to escape her restraints and out of her bedroom and into the hallway, where she collapsed and died. Her body was found at the top of the staircase. 3rd and 4th degree burns on her feet indicated that she got very close to the fire around the time she died. The medical examiner who performed an autopsy on her could not determine if the burns occurred before or after her death. Michaela's body was found in her bedroom. She was still in her bed, her hands tied to it, and her lower body hanging off of it. Like with her older sister, Michaela's burns may have occurred while she was still alive. William had been able to free himself of his restraints, exit the house, and crawl to a neighbor's yard for help. The neighbor initially did not recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Meanwhile, Hayes and Komsarjeski fled the scene in the Pettit family car. They were immediately spotted by police surveillance. Pursued and arrested 1 block away after crashing into a police car. The home invasion had lasted 7 hours. Both Hayes and Komsarjeski confessed to the murders. Detectives testified that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout their interrogation. Each assailant claimed that the other was the driving force and mastermind behind the home invasion. Komsarjeski was also blamed William for the murders. In Komsarjeski's diary, which was later entered into evidence, he called William a coward and claimed that he could have saved his family if he wanted to. Hawk Pettit was a nurse and co-director of the health center at Cheshire Academy, a private boarding school in Cheshire. She met her husband at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh in 1985, where she was a new oncology nurse and he was a third-year medical student at the University of Pittsburgh. She and Dr. Pettit married in 1985. Pettit's elder daughter, Haley, had just graduated from Miss Porter's school, where she played varsity, cross-country, basketball, and crew, and was a high honor roll student. While Miss Porter's, she was elected to the senior leadership of Athletic Association head. She also won a school award for exceptional community service. Haley was scheduled to attend Dartmouth College, where she wanted to study medicine. Haley had been an active fundraiser for multiple sclerosis research following her mother's diagnosis with that disease. She captained a walk MS team called Haley's Hope. The Pettit's younger daughter, Michaela, attended the Chase Collegiate School before her death. After Haley left for college, Michaela planned on taking over Haley's Hope and renaming it Michaela's Miracle. Michaela often cooked for her family and had done so the evening before the murders. With William, the sole survivor of the home invasion, was an endocrinologist at Plainville. He was also the medical director of the Joslin Diabetes Center at Connecticut Central Hospital. He survived when he escaped via a direct external exit from the basement despite his injuries. William has not returned to his medical practice since the murders, stating his desire to be active in the foundation set up to honor the memory of his family. He contemplated running for Congress as a Republican, but later decided against it. In the following election cycle, he successfully campaigned for the Connecticut General Assembly and served as a state representative. Hayes, born Stephen Joseph Hayes, was first convicted for an offense as an adult in 1980 at age 16. She was paroled in 1982, but violated her parole conditions 7 weeks later. During the time between this incident and the Cheshire Murders, Hayes was arrested nearly 30 times and spent most of this time incarcerated. Hayes lost Hayes' last arrest before the Cheshire Murders was in 2004 after she smashed a car window with a rock and stole a woman's purse. She was paroled in 2006 and was sent to the Silly Man halfway house where she met Komisarjevsky. Hayes was found guilty on 16 of 17 counts related to the Cheshire Murders on October 5th, 2010. On November 8th, 2010, the jury returned with a recommendation for her to be executed. Hayes was formally sorry, I had to take a second to breathe. I'm still recovering from a cold. Hayes was an inmate. Hayes was formally sentenced to death by Superior Court Judge John C. Blue on December 2nd, 2010. Hayes was an inmate of the Connecticut Department of Correction subsequent to serving sentencing for the Pettit murders and up until August 16, 2016, when she was transferred to a correctional facility in Pennsylvania as part of an interstate corrections compact. She was incarcerated in the Northern Correctional Institution, which housed the state's death row for men in Somers, Connecticut. The method of execution employed by Connecticut was lethal injection, and the state execution chamber was located in the Osborne Correctional Institution in Somers. This sentence became a life sentence when the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated the sentence in 2015. In an interview in October 2019, Hayes stated she was transgender and was undergoing hormone therapy as part of her gender transition while incarcerated. She said she had been diagnosed with a gender identity disorder at 16, but never treated. Komisarjevsky, originally from Torrington, was Hayes' co-conspirator in the home invasion and murders. He was born to a 16-year-old girl impregnated by a mechanic who was barely out of his teens, according to adoption officials. He was adopted by Benedict Komisarjevsky, the son of theatrical director Theodore Komisarjevsky and dancer Ernestine Stodell, and his wife Jude. He was sexually abused as a child, also burned and tortured. In the early 1990s, Komisarjevsky's sister accused him of sexually assaulting her. He was convicted, and during the penalty phase of his trial, Komisarjevsky's father conceded that it was probably true. Komisarjevsky committed his first burglary when he was 14. Excuse me. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 home invasions. Komisarjevsky's defense attorney at the time says that Komisarjevsky told him that about every burglary he committed in perfect detail. Komisarjevsky told his attorney that after robbing the houses, he would go to rooms where the occupants were sleeping and listen to them breathe. He said he did this because he enjoyed the feeling of invading people's homes and violating their security. Komisarjevsky was convicted of 12 counts of burglary in December of 2002. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison with 6 years of special parole. During a sentencing hearing, Judge James Bentivegna described Komisarjevsky as a calculated, cold-blooded predator. Komisarjevsky was paroled in April 2007. Under Connecticut law, prosecutors were supposed to send the parole board a transcript of the sentencing proceeding. But the parole board that released Komisarjevsky never received the transcript and was not aware of all the details regarding his case. After being paroled, Komisarjevsky stayed at the Silly Man halfway house where he met Hayes. Komisarjevsky remained incarcerated at the Walker Reception Center in lieu of a $15 million bond until his conviction. His trial began on September 19, 2011, and on October 13, 2011, he was convicted on all 17 counts. On December 9, 2011, the jury recommended the death penalty. On January 27, 2012, Judge John Blue sentenced Komisarjevsky to death by lethal injection. His sentence also was reduced to a life sentence when the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated their sentence in 2015. As of August 16, 2016, both Hayes and Komisarjevsky were transferred to separate prison facilities in Pennsylvania to serve their sentences. According to Connecticut state prison officials, the transfer was done as part of an interstate corrections compact due to reasons pertaining to safety and security. On August 18th, after being transferred, Komisarjevsky attempted to commit suicide by hanging himself. Komisarjevsky has sought a retrial. Prior to the first trial, his attorneys were not provided with recordings and says his attorneys were not provided with recordings that he says could have helped his case, as they were destroyed due to a lightning strike in 2010. Backups were later found in 2014 at Cheshire Town Hall. Komisarjevsky's attorneys argued that the recordings could have helped bolster their argument that the police were inadequate in their response and therefore raised questions about the credibility of their testimony. Komisarjevsky also argued that he did not receive a fair trial due to the location of the trial. Judge John Blue had denied a request by defense attorneys for the trial to be moved from New Haven to Stamford, as the trial venue had already been changed once because it was so notorious throughout the region. Komisarjevsky contends there was so much prejudice against him in New Haven that it was not possible for him to receive a fair trial there. In September in 2019, it was relieved that the case would be heard by the Connecticut Supreme Court. The court heard oral arguments in October of 2019. On April 12, 2021, the Connecticut Supreme Court rejected Komisarjevsky's appeal in a 7-0 decision. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear Komisarjevsky's appeal of the Connecticut Supreme Court's decision. Hayes' trial began on September 13, 2010. The jury was composed of 7 women and 5 men. Hayes' defense attorneys argued that Komisarjevsky was the mastermind behind the home invasion and that he was responsible for escalating the violent nature of the crime at every critical point. Prosecutors argued that both perps shared responsibility. Following the completion of the trial, the jury deliberated for about 5 hours and reached guilty verdicts on October 5th. The sentencing phase of the trial began on October 18, 2010, during which the jurors had to decide if Hayes should be executed or imprisoned for life. Deliberations began on November 5th. The first day of deliberations ended with the jury split over whether to recommend life in prison or death. The second day of the deliberations began on November 6th. Defense attorney Thomas Ullman told the jury that a sentence of life in prison would be the harshest possible punishment for his client Hayes because she was so tormented by her crimes and would be isolated in prison. Quote, life in prison without the possibility of release is the harshest penalty. It is a fate worse than death. If you want to end her misery, put her to death. If you want her to suffer and carry that burden forever, the guilt, shame, and humiliation, sentence her to life without the possibility of release. On November 8, 2010, the jury returned with a recommendation that Hayes be executed. The jury recommended a death sentence on each of the 6 capital felony counts for which Hayes was convicted. The jury had deliberated for about 17 hours over the course of 4 days before reaching a decision. Hayes had attempted to negotiate a life sentence and a plea bargain, but prosecutors chose to take the case to trial so that she could get the death penalty. After the verdict, her defense attorney stated, Hayes smiled upon hearing the jury's recommendation of a death sentence. She then added, quote, Hayes is thrilled. That's what she's wanted all along, end quote. During a press conference after the verdict, Dr. Pettit said, quote, we all know that God will be the final arbiter, and I think the defendant faces far more than serious punishments from the Lord than she can ever face from mankind. He also spoke about his family, saying, quote, Michaela was an 11-year-old little girl tortured and killed in her own bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals. Haley had a great future. She was a strong and courageous person, and Jennifer helped so many kids, end quote. Komisarjevsky's attorneys offered for him to plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors took the case to trial in order to give him the death penalty. Komisarjevsky's trial began on September 19, 2011. His attorneys blamed Hayes for the murders, arguing that she was the criminal mastermind, while their client was a confused and easily led man who did not intend to kill anyone. Komisarjevsky was found guilty on October 13, 2011. During his victim impact statement, Dr. Pettit described the crime as his personal holocaust and said, quote, I have a difficult time sleeping and trusting anymore. I hope to continue to honor my family. I push forward in the hope that good will overcome evil, end quote. Blue set July 20th, 2012 as Komisarjevsky's execution date. As with Hayes, Komisarjevsky's death sentence was turned into a life sentence in August of 2015. The Cheshire home invasion murders had a significant impact on Connecticut laws regarding the death penalty and on the debate surrounding the topic. The murders halted momentum to end the state's death penalty and ultimately delayed that abolition. In 2009, the Connecticut General Assembly sent legislation to abolish the state's death penalty to Governor M. Jody Rell, ostensibly to be signed into law. However, on June 5, 2009, Rell vetoed the bill instead and cited the Cheshire Murders as an exemplary reason for doing so. Quote, the crimes that were committed on that brutal July night were so far out of the range of normal understanding that now, more than 3 years later, we still find it difficult to accept that they happened in one of our communities. I have long believed that there are certain crimes so heinous, so depraved, that society is best served by imposing the ultimate sanction on the criminal, Hayes, stands convicted of such crimes, and today the jury has recommended that Hayes should be subjected to the death penalty. I agree." End quote. The home invasion murders led to immediate calls for reforms to Connecticut's criminal justice system. On July 31st, 2007, Governor Rell ordered electronic monitoring of paroled burglars. On September 21st, she banned parole for violent offenders and ordered a review of convicts already on parole. The murders and their aftermath were featured on the news magazine show Dateline NBC in a segment titled The Family on Sorghum Mill Drive. And on December 9, 2010, William Pettit appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in a full-hour episode about the murders of his family and the work of the Pettit Family Foundation. On August 5, 2012, Pettit married Christine Palouf and moved to Farmington, Connecticut. He met her when she was volunteering with the Pettit Family Foundation. HBO broadcast a documentary by filmmaker David David Heilbronner, called The Cheshire Murders, about the murders on July 22, 2013. On August 1st, 2013, Pettit told station WFSB that he and Palouf were expecting a child together. The baby, who was revealed to be a boy and named William Pettit III, was born on November 28, 2013 and October 2013. Pettit announced that he was considering running for Congress for the Republican Party after being approached by the National Republican Congressional Committee, who had asked him if he would be interested in running. Pettit ultimately decided not to be a candidate. But in May 2016, Pettit announced a bid for Connecticut's 22nd House District. Pettit was elected, ousting 11-term Democratic Representative Betty Vokus, and served as representative in the Connecticut House of Representatives until January of 2023. William condemned the Connecticut Supreme Court's decision to abolish the death penalty in August 2015, saying he believed the court had overstepped its powers and urging it to give greater consideration to the emotional impact, particularly on victims and their loved ones, that death penalty cases generate. Hawk Pettit's sister, Cindy Hawk Fenn, told NBC News that she was disheartened by the court's ruling. As always, I'm going to give you my little speech, but I would also like to add that at the end of this video, there will be flyers of missing people, unsolved homicides, whatever the case may be. I will be putting them here. I'm considering doing it on the gaming channel, even at the end of those videos. And it's also featured on my makeup and chats, where I just do daily get ready with me, and sometimes talk, sometimes don't. It just kind of depends on whether I have anything to say. And they're all linked in that description box down below, as well as everything you see on my face and body today. But that being said, please just watch them. You never know, you might know something. As always, though, please don't do anything I wouldn't do. Make good choices and be cautious and kind to others. And have a good week. I'll see y'all next week. Bye.